But there is one piece of legislation that's getting a lot of attention and support on both sides of the aisle, something that it would be great if you could get behind, and it was just introduced yesterday, and the number is 1207, and what it is going to do and can do is to audit the Federal Reserve. At least we can find out what they're doing.
If you add up what the Congress has done plus what the Fed has done, the obligation now is $9.3 trillion. And quite a few of those trillions, matter of fact, most of that has come from the Fed. And of course, we're not allowed to find out exactly what the Fed is doing. We have enough trouble figuring out what the Treasury is doing, let alone the Fed.
The law says that the GAO has the right to audit the Federal Reserve, except for A, B, C, D, and E, and that's everything that they do. So by law, they are prohibited. We're prohibited from auditing or getting any answers from the Fed, and yet they have more money and more control over our lives and your dollars and your future. They have control over the foreign policy and the domestic policy, and you don't have any right to know anything about it because I can't even get the information. It has to come about by the passage of legislation like this that demands that they are not independent and totally secret and that they can rule this country through the power of creating money. It's a monstrous fraud. It is something that has existed throughout history where the king gets control of the money and they inflate the currency and dilute the metals and print the money and whatever. But it has to stop. And if we don't, believe me, this thing will get much worse. So this, to me, is a major step in the right direction.
Ultimately, where we really need some supervision and some earmarks are the trillions of dollars spent by the Federal Reserve. They get to create their money out of thin air and spend it. They have no responsibility to tell us anything. Under the law, they're excluded from telling us where and what they do. So we neglect telling the Treasury how to spend TARP money, and then we complain about how they do it. But just think literally, the Treasury is minuscule compared to what the Federal Reserve does. The Treasury gets hundreds of billions, which is huge, of course, and then we neglect to talk about the Federal Reserve, where they're creating money out of thin air and supporting all their friends and taking care of certain banks and certain corporations. And this, to me, has to be addressed. I've introduced a bill, and it's called HR1207. And this would remove the restriction on us to find out what the Federal Reserve is doing. Today, the Federal Reserve, under the law, is not required to tell us anything. So all my bill does is remove this restriction and say, look, the Federal Reserve, you have a lot of power, you have too much power, you're spending a lot of money, you're taking care of people that we have no idea what you're doing. We in the Congress have a responsibility to know exactly what you're doing. This bill, H.R. 1207, will allow us, for once and for all, to have some supervision of the Federal Reserve.
Today, I believe that you will soon be introducing legislation. On the floor, you asked me and all the members, both Republican and Democrat, to join you in this legislation dealing with the Federal Reserve. Would you maybe explain that to the viewers, because you will be introducing this soon, I think?
Yeah, well, matter of fact, I did get a chance after we talked, and I appreciate your support on this bill. But I am not the kind to be overly aggressive and go out and get the names and sign up and do the legwork that I should do. But while we were sitting there, it was rather amazing. You and I were talking, and before I knew it, I had 12 signatures on, which is pretty good when I didn't even get off my chair. And we had, what, maybe about 5 Democrats came over, which tells me it's a ripe issue. And what it is, it's a Federal Reserve Transparency Act.
Right.
In the code, it said the GAO has an obligation to audit the Fed, except for A, B, C, D, which is everything. So under the law, we're not even allowed to get any answers from the Federal Reserve. So this isn't dealing with returning to the gold standard and then these major moves. This is just saying, do we have a right to know? And this is ripe. And the fact that we were getting signatures like that, and just common sense would tell almost any member of Congress to say, you know, can you imagine somebody going home and say, oh yeah, there's a bill that says that Congress has a right to know what the Fed's doing. Oh no, I don't think we have a right. So I think I'm getting energized over this, and I think we can get a lot of support.
I know you can, because at the time of this country's history today, I think there's more distrust than I've seen in a long time of government, and particularly up here in Washington, because of, as you may mention, the previous administration and this administration seem to be out of touch with the American people. They really do, and the fact that the Federal Reserve has so much power and influence, and yet members of Congress, the American people, can't ask them a question. It's crazy.
I think I could make the case for saying that the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board is more powerful than our president. When you think he can control trillions of dollars without appropriation, he's certainly more powerful than the Congress. We're over there. We think we're important voting on an $800 billion package, but he can go and create $3 trillion and not even tell us.